The turning tide. In the distance a hum, the soft sound of people waking up to what is possible for the earth at this sensitive juncture, waking up to the call that is coming from our ancestors and from future generations, a call to awaken. Quoted from the Turning Tide Coalition. The taxi from Verona darted through town traffic, past the old stone walls and out the gates of the city. In a matter of minutes we had moved from the spicy bustle of Italian street life to the earthy sigh of the countryside, threading along steep, narrow, winding roads connecting exquisite Italian hill villages on our way to a retreat center in the tiny hill town of Cadine, nestled in the mountains 2 hours away. The sky was a cobalt blue. The mountains were crystal clear against the sky. I felt a sense of anticipation and excitement that something monumental was in store as I arrived and began to meet my new colleagues. We were there to sit and talk with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. It was in the early summer of 2001, and I had been invited to something called the Synthesis Dialogues, a gathering of 30 people, all global activists, religious leaders, or spiritual teachers. The purpose of the gathering was to engage with each other and His Holiness about the state of the world. The 30 participants were global and grassroots leaders from all parts of the world, each with a common commitment to human potential and spirituality. Each was at work on some aspect of the injustice, pain, and suffering that plagues the human family. These were people working in the trenches, confronting war, poverty, hunger, violence, and oppression that in some cases was massive in scale. Some of the participants had endured imprisonment and torture and yet had returned to the work, even more determined to catalyze change and transformation. Just being among them was humbling. We met for several days with each other before His Holiness arrived. We shared our life stories and meditated together. We took walks in the mountains and we sang together. We connected deeply and earned each other's respect, grew to love each other, and were effectively at work and in dialogue by the time His Holiness the Dalai Lama joined us, accompanied by the Tibetan monks and scholars who travel with him. The meeting had already been a potent and productive gathering for us all, even before he came. But when he joined us, when he brought his presence, His Holiness, everything moved to a different level. Somehow we each were able to separate ourselves from our own individual story and our own life drama, and witness our world rather than grapple with its problems. In our conversation, we did not skirt the problems of the world, but held them in clear view. His Holiness spoke of the tragic and cruel oppression of his people by the Chinese government and the unbearable torture and atrocities being perpetrated on the remaining Tibetans inside Chinese Tibet. The story of his narrow escape from being killed by the Chinese as a teenager and now living in exile for decades was already well known in our circle. This is a man who is no stranger to hardship, oppression, injustice, and suffering. Yet what emerged from our dialogues was indeed a synthesis and a consensus that the world is awakening, that the tide is turning. We saw and felt that even in the face of staggering statistics about the degradation of the environment, the escalation of violence and war, the rampant abuses of human rights, the sweeping epidemic of AIDS and other diseases, and the pain of widespread poverty, something fundamental is shifting at the core. Old, inaccurate assumptions are dropping away, and an emergence, a spiritual power, a soulful surge and transformation is bubbling up everywhere and is more powerful, more steady, more unshakable than the challenges that confront us. We all had different labels for it, but we knew we were talking about the same thing. For me, it was the beginning of the disintegration of scarcity and the you or me world it creates, especially destructive in our relationship with money and its ultimate unworkability, its gross misreading of the real truth and integrity of life, and its unsustainable premise. We agreed that the vision emerging in its place was, and is now even more so, than the you and me world that Buckminster Fuller predicted years before, a world where we live in the context and truth of sufficiency and respect for enough, exactly enough for everyone, everywhere, a world that works for everyone, with no one and nothing left out, a world where solidarity replaces charity, in a world where the dream is a dream, not for some at the expense of others, but a dream for all, a world where the intelligent and benevolent force of nature is the force that we respect and align with, a world where the love of money is replaced by the use of money as an expression of love. As we sat in a circle together, His Holiness listened to each of us and spoke with us, reflecting on the nature of our respective commitments in the context of the whole. He described the universal desire people have to be happy and avoid suffering, and the way an ethical life becomes a fulfilling life. In our relationship with money, he said, when we bring the divine presence to this temple of plenty, we create an authentic and ethical relationship with money that expands, enlarges, and magnifies its value. In the dialogue with my colleagues, there in the presence of His Holiness, I saw this as I had never seen it before. I felt it. It was visceral, physical, and deeply moving. I remembered a quote that I had heard years ago from Teilhard de Chardin. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience. Sitting before the Dalai Lama, I experienced myself as a spiritual being, dealing in the realm of human experience. The retreat meeting and the Dalai Lama himself created the physical, intellectual, and spiritual space for clarity and reflection. From that synthesis emerged an even deeper, more exquisite experience of the truth and a renewal of that commitment.